welcome to Suricata Crafts. I'm Rebecca. Today I'm going to show you how to take a $7 craft kit from Crafts to Go, get creative, and make a beautiful wall hanging. Opening the box, you'll find that your kit contains acrylic yarn in teal, fluorescent yellow, which is actually very, very bright in person, a bigger ball of gray, and a small ball of white, mainly for your warp threads. A dowel that's 29 centimeters by 6 millimeters, a plastic yarn needle, some very undetailed instructions, a weaving frame. This is made out of a thick cardboard with notches, and I also used a wide tooth comb for pushing down the threads, and a 2-inch wide piece of cardstock so you have something to push against. We're going to start by warping your loom. Pull out a fair amount of white and tie a slip knot at one end. Loop it around your first peg and pull it tight. We're going to start by going up and down around the pegs, keeping your string taut but not tight. This is a weaving frame, not a guitar. When you get to the end, cut your thread and tie a knot. Get it as tight as you can, but it's not likely to be very tight at all. We'll fix that in a moment. Now we're going to even out the threads. Some of them are tighter than others, so we're going to start at the end, pulling our threads a little tighter as we go. This will take up some of the slack and make it easier for us to weave and end up with a more even wall hanging. Just going to tighten the knot at the end. Now we're going to weave in our piece of cardstock. This gives you something to push on so you don't push the threads off the end of your weaving loom. Starting to weave. I chose gray as my starting color. I pulled the center of the ball out and stretched out a fair amount of gray to start with. I measured out 8 widths of my board plus a little extra. You'll need extra for weaving in your ends later. Put the rest of your gray aside and so it doesn't get tangled with your threads. I threaded my needle by folding the yarn over the needle and pushing it through the hole. This hole is fairly big, but it will get easier with time. Then, starting at the left side of your board, you're going to weave opposite that piece of cardboard. You're going to start with an under, and then you're going to go over the threads, all the way across, under, over, under, over. When you reach the end, pull your yarn all the way through, leaving a little tail. Now we'd like to make this arc shape. So what you're going to do is hold your thread, angle at the other end, and then pull it down. This will give you some slack in your thread and prevent your two sides from bowing inwards. Now we're going to come back the other way, going right to left and opposite the thread that you did the last time. If you did over, this time you're going under that thread. Make your arcing shape by pulling up and down. Stretch your ends so they're slack. but not too much. You might need to straighten it out a bit and tighten it up, and then use your comb to push it down against the cardboard. We're going to do a few more rows like this, just over, under, opposite what you did the row before. This is called plain weave. Work for 4 rows and then leave your tail loose on the left-hand side. We'll weave that in later. Now we're going to switch to teal. Pull out a fair amount and count out about 4 widths of your board. Snip it and then thread your needle. Starting at the left-hand side and going opposite the last row, we're going to weave about a third of the way across the board, and then back, just doing plain weave like we did before. Make a little arc and beat it down. This time we're going to go 1 warp thread less than we did the last time, and as we do this, it will angle it up in a triangle. When you've reduced your threads down to the end, we're just going to leave the end of the teal thread loose at the left. Now working in white, we're going to pull out about 6 widths of the board, doubled, and you're going to thread the 2 loose ends onto your needle. We're going to anchor it to the first warp thread by pulling it through the loop. Now we're going to do a little bit of a different technique. You're going to go left to right opposite your thread, under 1 thread, but keep your loop of yarn at the bottom. Now putting it at the top, you're going to go under your loop of thread. Keep your thread at the bottom and go over the threads and under the warp. Then keeping your thread at the top, go under the warp thread and pull it through. We're going to go over the long thread and under the long thread, all the way across, just switching back and forth. I followed this across and then went back. You just do this for a few rows just to give it some more texture and volume. Now working with gray, we're going to pull out about 11 widths of the board and then quadruple that. So pull out that amount of yarn 4 times. So 11 widths times 4. Fold it in half and fold it in half again. Start by going under the first warp thread on your right, leaving your ends loose. Careful not to get tangled up in the threads below, they can be a pain. We're going to go under 2 threads going from right to left. Then we're going to go back 1 and under 2 threads. You're going to go under 2 threads, back 1, under 2 threads, back 1. So really you're wrapping your yarn around 1 thread at a time, all the way across to the left. Don't pull your threads too tight. We want it to have a nice puffy braided effect. If you've pulled it too tight, use your yarn needle to loosen it up a little bit as you go along. It's harder to loosen them up afterwards. Using your fingers, push them all down to match up with the row below. We're going to work our way back now. You're going to work opposite and go under 2 threads and back 1. It's going to make your loops angle opposite from the row that we did first. Keep going with under 2, back 1, all the way across, ensuring that you don't pull them too tight. Now we're going to start working with the fluorescent yellow. I measured out about 6 widths of the board and threaded my needle single. We're going to start at the right hand side, holding down the threads from the row before, and work in plain weave about halfway across, maybe a little bit more. Make your arc and push it down. Then work your way back, doing the opposite threads. If you went under, this time you're going to go over. Make your arc and push it down. And work your way back, doing one more thread than we did the last time. I'm going to work in even weave for about an inch, angling it in as I go up just to make an organic shape. For a quick interlude, Igarol decided he needed to help. Working with white again, I pulled out a few widths of the board, cut my thread, threaded my needle, and anchored it to the first warp thread on the right. This time, as we move from right to left, we're going to be tying one knot along each of the warp threads. Push it down to the color below, but not too tightly. You don't want to smush it. So just one knot per thread all the way across. Coming back, I'm going to be working in plain weave again, just filling in the space and making a new organic shape. There's no rhyme or reason to what I'm doing, I just do what pleases me and hope it looks good. If it doesn't, I pull it out and try something else. Working my way across, I'm just adding a thick white stripe, just in plain weave with the textured bottom and now the textured top. Just doing the same thing, tying one knot per thread, left to right. Let's switch back to gray. We're going to make another couple of thick braids, so we need quite a bit of fabric. So I pulled out about 2 meters and then quadrupled it. So 8 meters in total, folded in half and then folded in half again, anchored to the first warp thread on the left. we're going to work in the same technique we did before, under 2, back 1. All the way across, remembering not to pull too tight, you want the texture. When you get to the end, wrap the last thread and start working your way back. We're going to leave these threads loose at the left. We're going to use them again in a few minutes. I'm working with teal, working in plain weave, and I wanted to create some balance in color. So I'm adding a few rows to the right, working in arcs so I don't pull in the threads too much. Just over, under again, back and forth until I'm happy with the shape it's made. Now pick up the gray yarn that we had left on the side, thread your needle again, and we're going to add a braid to the top here. This saves us from having to weave in a few more ends. Work all the way to the right and then come back to the left. Under 2, back 1. This is where I measured to see if I'll have enough. You need 2 plus a bit widths to get 1 row across. I guessed, played yarn chicken, and failed. This is as far as the yarn went, so I'm just tucking it behind, and I'll start a new group of strands. I just pulled out double the width times 4, so technically 8 widths, folded it in half, folded it in half again, and then anchored it to the next string in line. There's a little gap now, but the next row will close the gap, so you won't be able to see it. So anchor it, and then start again with your under 2, back 1 pattern. Switching back to yellow, we're going to try a different technique. This is called the linen stitch. So instead of going over 1, under 1, you're going to start with over 2, under 1, and in each consecutive row, the visible warp thread where you went under is going to move 1 spot to the right, making sure that the one you go under is 1 thread to the right of the previous row. Just continue this all the way up, moving your pattern 1 thread to the right each row. continue in the linen stitch, working across. Then as I got to the right, I wanted a bit more height, so I just worked a few short rows back and forth until I got down to no threads. Working in white again, we're going to take about 8 meters again, folded in half and half again, and then we're going to anchor the loose threads to your first warp thread on the left. So you're going to split your 4 threads, reach in between them under the warp thread, pulling the loop of your yarn up through your 4 threads. And split, pull under and up through, all the way across. Creates a different kind of braid. When you reach the end, anchor your yarn again there with a knot, and we're going to work back doing a double knot braid. So you're going to split your 8 threads into 4 and 4 and do the same technique, reaching between the 4 and 4 under your warp thread and pull the loop of yarn up through. Now again with the teal. Take a few widths of the board, and we're going to use the same technique we used in white at the bottom, where you're going to go under your looped thread from right to left, and then over your looped thread from right to left. You're going to go under and over, back and forth, remembering not to pull them too tight because we like the loose texture. Push it down a little bit. And if you have to finagle the loops a little bit to make them more even, that's fine. Just don't pull them too tight because they'll warp your warp threads. To finish off the teal, I'm just going to work 1 row of straight stitch to anchor down the loops. Switching over to gray, I took about 10 widths of the board, plus a little bit, threaded my needle, and we're going to work an even weave for a few rows to top off our wall hanging. I worked about 8 rows of even weave in the gray. To finish off, I'm going to make 1 knot along the top of each warp thread to help anchor the weaving down. Now for the tassels. I'm going to take my gray yarn and wrap it around a box 66 times. This gives us 3 yarn pieces per tassel for each thread. I pulled out the cardstock and made a gap between the base layer and the rest of the weaving. The base layer won't be seen in the end. Then I took 3 yarn tassels, put them under the warp thread, and pulled the ends through the looped edge. I did this all the way across, 3 threads per warp thread. Be sure to always work in the same direction, left to right or right to left, so all of your knots face the same way. After you have all of your tassels tied on, use the comb to push the base layer up against the tassel to make them all straight. Then take your scissors and cut every other warp thread along the bottom. You need to take these 2 threads and tie them into a double knot, otherwise your entire weaving will slide right off the bottom. Now take your dowel and weave it over under each thread along the top of the weaving. I definitely should have sanded this dowel first, as it kept catching on the yarn threads. Even out your loops as much as you can. And now we're going to sew in all of those ends. I'm using my metal yarn needle because I like the slanted end and find I have better leverage with it. So you're just going to thread your needle with one of the ends, go up the back of the weaving and down, making sure it doesn't poke through to the front. Continue until all of your ends are sewn in. I know this can be a tedious process. Now this is your finished wall hanging. I added a hanger by wrapping the yarn around 3 times and tying a knot on each side. Then I took my iron using the steam function and straightened out the tassels at the bottom and then trimmed them to be even. And this is your finished wall hanging. Thank you for joining me. I'm Rebecca at Suricata Crafts. You can find me on Facebook and on Instagram. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss any of my videos. Have a great day and happy crafting!